What?
Can we use notes or something?
No.
No.
But you'll know this material. Okay. The greatest rival to Ishtar was Marduk of Babylon. And as your book says, his prominence was assigned, curiously enough, due to the political good fortune of Hammurabi, who was the sixth king of the first dynasty of Babylon. If you know anything about Hammurabi, ever heard that name before? Yes.
Did we develop the Code of Hammurabi?
The Code of Hammurabi. All right. So it was a system of laws. And as far as we know, the first system of laws that was set down in, I hate to say writing because cuneiform is not written, well, yeah, writing. It was chiseled in stone. And oddly enough, there are many who posit that the Ten Commandments come out of the Code of Hammurabi, at least the ideas of the Ten Commandments. So Hammurabi was a very successful king, and he attributed his good fortune to Marduk. And so Marduk became the chief god not only of Babylon, but of that whole area. In fact, once Marduk was established, they even went back and changed all of their literature to give him prominence and say he's always been. And here, Marduk here in this photograph is right here, and he is slaying another god by the name of Timurat, his arch rival, if you will. When you think about all that, the Babylonians had a lot of myths and epics. They had the story of creation, and I'll leave you to read for yourself, how all that came about. That's not really important to our context here. But they were the first ones that we know of to come up with an actual story of creation. They had a story of the flood, and of particular interest in that is the journey of Gilgamesh, because it has to do with that whole thing. They had a myth or story of Ishtar, who went to the land of the dead, and then through a series of other things, finally returned, and she came back with spring. The reason she went there is things on earth got blah. Just everything was not hunky-dory. And so she decided that the land of the dead had captured the elan, the spirit of the earth, and then she went to recover it. And when she came back, there was spring. And then, of course, the journey of Gilgamesh, and it is probably the most finished and literary of the Babylonian epics. And it begins with the tale of the friendship of Gilgamesh, the ruler of the city of Uruk, and the wild man named Enkidu. And the whole story is just full of pathos or sadness of human disappointment in the face of death.
Quick question.
Yes.
Could the Babylonian myths and epics, the creation of the flood,
Mm-hmm.
could that possibly relate to the Bible as well? They were mentioning, the flood and everything in the Bible, and they were talking about the Babylonians.
Yeah. Skylar, there's a lot of theologians who say yes, that this is where the Hebrews got, their story, or at least they borrowed that story and made it their own. If you, how to say this nicely, if you're a fundamentalist, and that's a very narrow-minded view, you would say not only no, but hell no. But if you're more of a liberal, you would say that's a possibility. It certainly doesn't negate the story of the flood in Scripture, in Christian Scripture or Hebrew Scripture, by any way, shape, or form, because it is for different reasons and happens in different ways. Joy.
Is that if somebody would contest, like, the Scriptures with
you know, somebody having another version of the flood. They have a lot of contestants in it. There's over 400 civilizations that have the same story.
Oh, yeah. And here, folks, let me just give you a little tip. There are a lot of things worth arguing about. This isn't one of them. I have a good friend. He's now gone and living in paradise now. But he said the only thing worth arguing about is arguing with the devil over a lost soul. Everything else is trivial and not worth getting into a disagreement over.
You're right.
So, you know, I don't argue with people about the creation or the flood or anything of that nature. It's one of those arguments neither side can win. And all you do is end up with strained relationships. Okay, any other questions? The Sumer-Akkadians also, especially the Babylonians, were heavy into sacrifice and magic. To ensure the blessings of this life, the Babylonians resorted to their priests for conducting sacrifices, for doing incantations, for ritual prayers, for reading of the stars. And they listened in rapt attention to the songs of the flute and the songs of prostration that were offered up before the gods. They believed that if they did these songs correctly, they would soothe the gods. If perhaps they were angry, they would make them more mellow. And if the gods decided, you know, to be unkind, well, they had several incantations, powerful and compelling, that they believed the gods must heed and listen to. Sacrifice was sometimes human. Most often was perhaps an animal, but, you know, they did do human sacrifices in those days. And I like that part, reading of the stars. How many of you read your horoscope daily? Okay. You put much credence in that? I just heard on the news yesterday that a lot of psychics and tarot card readers are being put out of business because they failed to fill out a government form. And they said, well, we didn't know. You know, if they were truly psychic, you'd have thought they would know, wouldn't you? The priests also acted through what was called the Temple Corporation. They were real busy men. They were well organized for their tasks. They offered a lot of services to their clientele. And so they decided, you know, the best way to do this is to bring everything central to a temple complex. So huge walls and large buildings were constructed. And oftentimes in the very middle, and this is a photograph of one that was unearthed about 1923 near what we think is Ur. And this is a ziggurat. And it was a very tall, almost, you know, human-built mountain encased in brick with a shrine on top. Here in these temple complexes, the priests conducted schools for the teaching of reading, writing, and arithmetic. And here as well, they practiced their divination and arts of astrology. Divination was, in fact, one of the main functions of the priesthood. And as the author of your book says, they were most intrigued by the interest